Okay, so now we look at the fiscal regime of the upstream oil and gas operations, of the upstream oil and gas system. Now, when we talk about fiscal regime, what is it? Now, the petroleum fiscal regime is a set of laws, regulations, and agreements which govern the sharing of economic benefits derived from the production of petroleum between the resource owner, which is the government, and the oil and gas companies, which are the contractors. So they provide a means through which companies operate in countries for the exploration of petroleum activities. So they specify how government enters into contract with these oil and gas contractors and how costs and revenues are to be allocated or shared. So there are three main contractual agreements under which countries grant oil and gas exploration and production rights to upstream petroleum companies. So these are the production sharing contracts or production sharing agreements, the royalty tax regime or the concessionary system, or what we also call the licensing system, and what we call service contract, which may be a pure service contract or a risk service contract. Now, most CIT questions ask you which system is better. One thing you should know is that no one type of fiscal regime is better than the other, because all oil contracts address two things: how profits are to be shared between the host government and the contractors, and how costs are to be allocated. So that is it. So if any question is being asked in the exam at your level, let's say, assuming they say the PSA is better than the royalty tax system, what are your points, or justify this? You must explain what the PSA is, its features or its characteristics. You can even chip in some advantages and disadvantages for both the PSA and the royalty tax system. Then you go forward to say that you think none of them is better than the other because the government can always manipulate the contracts to suit himself. And also, most petroleum contracts specify two things, or they address two things: how profits are to be shared between the host government and the contractors, and how costs are to be treated. Okay, so that is it. Now we look at what the production sharing contract means. So the production sharing contract or the production sharing agreement involves the state fully participating in petroleum operations as a regular fiscal agent and commercial party. So it retains ownership, that is a title to oil and gas and control of the resources, and the contractor pays royalty on gross production to the government if applicable. So the contractor is entitled to a predetermined share of the production for cost recovery called the cost oil in the industry. And generally, interest and other financial costs are not considered as cost oil. The remainder of the production called profit oil is shared between the government and the contractor at an agreed term. The contractor pays tax on its share of the profit. So usually, how do production sharing contracts work in general? Simply, government takes a part. Okay, so first of all, the government grants you exploration and production rights. Not so. Then it is the contractor who bears the exploration, the risk of exploration failure, because government does not participate in exploration. Okay, so once the contractor bears the risk of exploration, he takes, if during production, the oil that comes out, he takes a portion to recover his cost, which we call the cost oil. And whatever is left after recovery of the cost oil, is what we call profit oil. So you take a portion of the cost to cover your cost. You take a portion of the production to cover your cost. It could be in oil, it could be in revenue, which we call cost oil, and then the remainder is shared between the host government and the contractor, which we call the profit oil. So that is how the production sharing contract works. It was one of the first fiscal systems to ever come, and it started in Indonesia in 1966. Okay, so we look at the key features of the contractual arrangement. So as I was telling you, the exploration and production rights are granted to the contractor by the state. The contractor carries the economic risk of exploration failure. The state as the resource owner is entitled to a portion of the oil and gas produced. And the contractor keeps an agreed portion to cover their cost, which is called cost oil. And the remaining oil, which is the profit oil, is shared between the contractor and the state. So in some jurisdictions, the contractor's share of the profit oil is also subject to income tax. So it depends on the particular jurisdiction. So what are the fiscal elements in the production sharing contract? As we saw earlier on, the elements are the cost oil and the profit oil. So the cost oil, a specified percentage of product that is assigned to the contractor or joint venturer to help in the cost recovery. It is royalty paid and cost allowed to be recovered. The higher the cost oil, the worse it is for the state and the better it is for the contractor. Yes, because the state gets a minimal share of the profit oil. Now, the profit oil, with the profit oil, the revenues remaining after the royalties and cost recovery are called profit oil or profit gas. Some people call it so. It is calculated as the revenue less royalty due to government and any cost that is allowed to be deducted before the profit oil is determined. The contractor's share of profit oil is mostly taxable. Okay, so that is the production sharing contract. What are the advantages of the production sharing contract? One, it enhances economic stability as the contractor can recoup costs incurred and the host government can equally enjoy benefits. There is government participation, which helps because the government is a resource owner, and all operational risks are borne by the contractor as the government does not have to make investments, which saves the economy of huge investments. Then host government also has an added advantage to share any potential profits without having to make any investment unless they are particularly agreed upon. And they also enhance the development of indigenous service through local content because government is directly part. You have to employ local or indigenous to work in the petroleum operations. What are the disadvantages? The disadvantages are that cost incurred is recoverable after all, and this creates room for inefficiencies. And government regulation, including audit involvement, creates unnecessary inconvenience for the contractors. Yes. And there is often no direct assignment of interest. You see, some of these are the disadvantages that production sharing contracts create, and you must be ready to bring some of them. You can't really remember all, but the few ones that you can remember, you just chip it in. It's just a systematic process, just knowing how to answer questions, and then you can crack your oil and gas exam.